So lately, I've been rereading books that I read when I was the worst age a person can be, which is 14. Worst in the sense that it's terrible for you because you have to be 14, you have to feel what it feels like to be a 14-year-old, and it's terrible for the people around you who have to have a 14-year-old in their midst. And when I saw this book at a used book sale, I was flooded with memories, not necessarily of the book itself, because I don't think it's all that memorable. What came rushing back to me was the fact that because of this book, I forced my parents to rent me a cello, and I did lessons for almost 2 years. And that ridiculous, insane anecdote alone is the reason why I am sitting before you rereading If I Stay by Gayle Forman. This is a book about a teenager who gets into a brutal car crash with her family, and she has to decide whether or not she wants to fight to survive. I am 50 pages into this reread, so let's start talking about it. This begins incredibly with not one, not two, but three title pages. This is awesome because what the hell, and also because I'll put a photo up. It is so incredibly pixelated and not quite centered. The story itself starts with our narrator Mia sitting at the breakfast table with her happy, funny, loving family as they celebrate the snow day. The first line of this book is, "Everyone thinks it was because of the snow." And in a way, I suppose that's true. And I could feel how my 14-year-old self would have felt reading this. The dread, the tension, knowing what the plot of this book is, knowing what's to come with the car crash, like that truly, it says it in the summary, like the car crash is 10 pages in. I would have ate that shit up. It's not actually a lot of snow that they get, but she says that the county shuts down as they wait for the one snowplow to clear the roads, and I thought that was incredibly real. On Vancouver Island, where I live, people love to say that there are only 3 snowplows, which I don't think is true at all, but it is true that it snows every single year, and every single year, everyone's like, guys, we had no idea this was going to happen. At the breakfast table, her mom and dad are cracking jokes, and her little brother Teddy is celebrating the snow day that he gets to have. At this point in the book, and still where I am at 50 pages in, her dad seems to have not necessarily more character, but more characteristics than her mom does. He is described by her as a reformed punker. He has gone, taken this hard pivot into being very square. He wears bow ties. He's got a pipe. And she's not sure if this pivot is sarcastic because it's such a shift from what he was, and his personality hasn't really changed. It's just how he styles himself. Her parents are fun. Mia, she's not very fun. Listen, she plays the cello, and I say this with love and from experience as a former teenage cello player. They're all snobs about it. Adding on to this is the fact that in the dialogue, she talks in a little bit of a pretentious way. She'll say things like, "I'm pondering going back to bed," and she'll often drop contractions. This is not too much of a bother for me because it does not extend to the narrative voice, which is her speaking in first person. I think if it did, it would get really tired really fast, but there isn't a ton of dialogue because almost immediately into this book, everybody is incapacitated. When she's thinking about the cello and how much she loves the cello, which seems to be really all she does, she's thinking about how she hasn't quite got into Juilliard yet, but they did clap for her at the end, which, as she says, apparently doesn't happen very often. And the faux humility of that almost took me to my knees. I almost actually dropped dead. So hard to read. That is such an embarrassing thing to say. That is so funny. It almost feels deliberately ridiculous. And I will say it does feel true to the way a snobbish teenage cello player would probably act and think. What is insane is that Mia thinks that it's completely undesirable to play the cello. She's a freak. She's weird. She's a weirdo. Have you ever seen her without this cello bow? But she has overcome this social adversity of being a cello player because of how much she loves this instrument and the deep connection that she feels to it. She describes seeing it for the first time and how it looked almost human, a descriptor she will use over and over again, possibly her only descriptor for the cello. She also says, "It looked like if you played it, it would tell you secrets." I fell for that. It is so embarrassing reading this back and knowing that it made me pick up the fucking cello. Of course I fell for that. Absolutely, that speaks to an annoying 14-year-old. But you do have to look back and you have to wonder about yourself. What was wrong with you? At the breakfast table, Mia's parents tell her that there's a photo of her boyfriend, Adam, in the newspaper, and they comment how it's the most they've seen of him since the summer. This is because Adam is in a band aptly named the shooting stars, who are becoming very popular. They're playing gigs all over the Pacific Northwest. We are 10 pages in, by the way. It's a lot of exposition in the beginning, a lot of just like jam-packing information into this. Her and her family decide to go see their friends, Henry, who does web stuff, this is from 2009, and Willow, who is a nurse. They're from her parents' old friend group of punk rockers. So before we get into this next part, I do want to say that I have been picking at this book a little bit more than would give you a totally accurate picture of how I'm actually feeling while I'm reading it, which is that I'm kind of enjoying it. I actually think it's kind of fun. I like the very wholesome family dynamics. I like these lighthearted jabs and jokes. At one point, a little bit later on, she's thinking back to her, oh my god, small orange cat. Hello, baby. She's thinking back to her first date with her boyfriend, and after he picks her up, he whispers to her, your parents are so cool, and she says back, I know. I can't even articulate how much I love that. I love that it totally turns the typical teenage narrative of being really embarrassed by your parents on its head. It just like rejects that entirely, particularly because I think that embarrassment often is compounded if your parents show even a modicum of personality, and Mia's parents are full of personality, and she loves them and she thinks they're cool, and I love that. I just love it. It's really sweet, and it's kind of just like a joy to read about, and it absolutely adds a stronger pull on the heartstrings for what is to come. I do hope that there is a little bit more depth added into the relationships that Mia has in her life, because I don't think that girl who has a perfect life with lovely personal and familial relationships needing to choose whether or not she's going to live is all that interesting. But I do have some trust that this is going to be better than that it's going to make that choice seem harder to the reader. Because compared to YA fiction of this era that I have recently read, I think that the writing here is actually pretty solid. There are some lines that are phrased really awkwardly that are almost like kind of nonsensical. Like there's one line where she's talking about her boyfriend. She says, he's such the cool guy. Okay, not quite how you would say that. But this doesn't have the objectively stupid and nonsensical writing throughout We Were Liars, and it also doesn't have the grating voice of Paper Towns. That is all to say, I am actually enjoying reading it more than what I'm saying would make it seem. So the four of them pile into the car and they decide what music to play, deciding on classic for Mia. And now listen to this shit. I concentrate on the notes, imagining myself playing, feeling grateful for this chance to practice, happy to be in a warm car with my sonata and my family. I close my eyes. Line break. You wouldn't expect the radio to work afterward, but it does. Come on! That fucking rules. That rules. I don't care. I can feel my 14-year-old self's heart pounding. I can feel my morbid curiosity and my obsession with death. I can feel myself reading this over and over and over again, getting every gruesome, grisly detail. And I would be sated because this is gratuitously violent. Oh, the car radio thing is the perfect way to be like, the car crash has already happened. It's so exaggerated, but I think just the right amount to make it work so well. I think it's genuinely such a good line for this kind of book. Part of me genuinely feels like this car accident scene is one of the most absurdly violent things I've ever read in my life, and it is objectively not, because I do read dark and disturbing books frequently, but it feels so out of place in this book that it genuinely shocked and disturbed me. Just reading all of the details of what happened to the car alone, I wrote the note, so violent. And that's before we get to her father's brains splattered all over the road. She sees him and she knows she should be freaking out, but she's in shock. She walks around and she finds her mom, who is also clearly gruesomely dead, and then she sees a hand sticking out and she thinks, there's Teddy, I'll pull him out. But she looks closer at the hand, and on the hand is a cello bracelet, because literally everything is cello related. And she's like, I'm wearing that cello bracelet right now. This is her consciousness or her soul or whatever you want to say. And she is looking at her own body fighting to survive in the Oregon snow. She watches as the paramedics show up. They shove a tube down her throat. They wrap up her leg with its exposed bone. And then they get her into the ambulance where she follows, her soul, whatever it is, follows. I just want to say this has been pages and pages and pages of violence. It's nothing short of insane. I have no other way to describe it, and I know that I would have loved it. I think I actually would have had a really complex love-hate relationship with it. As an anxious kid who never really was that close to death, like never really experienced being close to death myself or having anyone all that close to me die, particularly car accidents, I was absolutely certain that me and my whole family were going to die gruesomely in a car accident. And I would think about that shit constantly. So to have it like confirmed almost in this book, oh my God, I can just feel how much I would have sickened myself by reading it, but also somehow felt comforted by the details of it. I don't know how to describe it. I know that makes me sound like incredibly fucked up, but I think there are a few people out there who will get what I'm saying. It's a specific experience of being a 14-year-old who like doesn't know how to be in the world and thinks that you are literally going to die at any moment. And I can't say I'm much different now. I don't drive. I will never drive. I literally cannot understand how everyone has deluded themselves into thinking that it's chill to just like get behind the wheel of a fucking car. What do you mean? We are all going to die. It's me and public transit forever, baby. So in the book, this is where the pattern that I think is going to take up most of the next 200 pages begins, which is an update on her current physical state and a timestamp, and then a memory. Now, this first memory is, as you might expect, about her cello and about her first recital. I have written in the margin here, girl, shut the fuck up about your fucking cello, which is unfortunate as this is the first memory. And so far, there have not been any memories that did not involve the cello to some degree. I am afraid that the constant references to the cello and the like musical metaphors alongside this pattern of present day and then memory is going to get very repetitive. But it hasn't so far. We learn here that she considers herself to be the black sheep of both her family and her school, because she plays the cello. This is absolutely not meant to be as funny as it is. I do think that we're supposed to believe that there's a world that exists where people would look down on her, where playing the cello is somehow undesirable. Girl, nobody cares about your fucking cello. Part of my ire here is definitely because this is a reflection of my 14-year-old self and how cool and different I thought I was for playing the cello. Like, I am truly looking at the darkest parts of myself right now, and it's hard. At first, I rolled my eyes a little bit because Mia feels like the black sheep of her family, and part of that is because she has dark hair and they're all blonde. That is silly. But then I thought about it a little bit more, and I thought that it actually is very realistic of what a young person would feel about their connection to their family. Now, a senior in high school, maybe that's pushing it a little bit. But I think if you are at the age where you live with your family, part of that connection to them is having a shared appearance. It's kind of stupid, but it's meant to be, and it's true to life, and I respect that. Her brain is not developed. Of course it's going to be stupid. Probably also the cello shit has stunted her at least a little bit. So she gets to the hospital and then is life flighted to Portland. At the first hospital, she hears that her brother is in the ambulance behind them, which is a relief to her because she hasn't seen the state of him, and she knows if he's in an ambulance, he's probably alive. When she gets to Portland, she's thinking about how she's meant to meet Adam there for his gig that night, and he's gonna think that she's late, but she actually is early. Then she gets a memory of her first date with Adam. He had got her tickets to Yo-Yo Ma, which he calls a ghetto name. You know, reading that from my 2025 lens, not great, not super cool. I do think it's extremely questionable, and it just gets more questionable and less cool when she says it's a Chinese name, and he says Chinese people are named things like Li, and then she laughs because he's just so charming, and he's just so funny, and he's just so cute. Okay, Mia, I don't know about that. So Mia is unsure whether or not this is actually a date that he's invited her on, and she says about her uncertainty, I didn't like being on soft ground any more than I liked fumbling my way through a new movement. That's why I practiced so much, so I could rush myself on solid ground and then work out the details from there. If that is not the most forced cello reference I've ever heard in my life, I mean, in what world has anyone ever said that sentence? It also just felt a little bit nonsensical. I don't know, the cello stuff is getting to me. They go to this concert. They have a magical experience. He appreciates the classical music, even though he probably likes pop or rock or punk or something that is implied to be more socially desirable, but more artistically valuable. She's a snob. Does it ever say anything like that outright? No, it does not. But you can feel it. It's there. When the concert finishes, they leave and they go for a little bit of a walk, and she realizes that these tickets were not gifted by his parents' friends. They were tickets that he bought himself, that he spent quite a bit of money on. And she says, why? Why me? Girl, get up. Why is she debasing herself all of a sudden? Why me? They have been very close friends for a while. They have been flirtatious. And she's like, oh my God, why me? Stop. Stop that. Get off the ground. But I will also say, I will give it credit. This is romantic in a perfect way for inexperienced teenagers. She thinks to herself that if she looks up, he's going to kiss her. And she starts thinking about how much she wants him to kiss her. And then she looks up and it says, my eyes flicked upward. Adam was there waiting for me. Oh, I would have loved that. Oh, that is great. Perfect balance of sappy and cute. Exactly what you want to read when you're 14. Okay, but then immediately we're back in the ICU and we get a list of her injuries, including a collapsed lung, a ruptured spleen, internal bleeding, contusions on her brain, broken ribs, abrasions on her legs and face, which will require skin grafts and cosmetic surgery. And she's in the operating room with her physical body as the doctors are trying to piece it back together. And I understand that she's still in shock here, but I think at this point in the book, 40 pages in, it would be nice to be getting a little bit more of how she's feeling. But I do understand what the book is doing with this whole like my life flashed before my eyes thing and mostly focusing on the memories. She leaves the OR, which she can only do when someone else opens the door. She has tried to walk through walls, but found that she cannot do that. So she both is and is not corporeal. I don't think that the logic really matters here. But I will just briefly say there is none. In the waiting room, she sees her grandparents and she starts thinking about her grandmother, who is like the most rational person in the world besides her belief in angels and her collecting of angel figurines. You know, this is YA. Everybody has like characteristics, but not all that much personality. And that's fine because none of these memories can be in any way unrelated to the cello. Mia sees her grandparents and she thinks about her recent audition for Juilliard. After her grandma, who planned to go with her, sprained her ankle, her grandpa took her. And it's another like cute moment of her living in this really wonderful, lovely family. Her grandpa took her on what was meant to be and planned by the grandma as like a girls' trip. And he was happy and like welcome to the idea of staying in this fancy frilly hotel, even though he's kind of like a quiet, gruff, working farm man. He took her to high tea. They went shopping together. It's sweet. It's really cute. And I think that's just true of the story itself so far. And I kind of love the contrast between the absurd violence and the sweetness of her interpersonal relationships. I'm having fun reading it, but I'm also prejudging it a little bit, knowing what is to come, knowing that the premise of this book is her choosing whether or not to stay and fight for her life. Because at this point, it's like, girl, your life is literally perfect. Like, yes. Absolutely. She's going to have to grieve her parents if she stays, and that is nothing to scoff at. But it's showing us that she has a life beyond her parents. Her parents are wonderful and they're huge parts of her life, but she has more than that. She has a lot of love. And I don't buy anyone ever choosing not to fight to live the life that Mia has. It's wonderful. It's a beautiful, full life that she has. I do think something more is going to be added to make her choice more interesting, more compelling, and more difficult. I also want to make a prediction right now, which is that she is going to get her offer from Juilliard, or maybe a rejection from Juilliard. Oh my God, can you imagine? While she's comatose. Absolutely makes no sense, but it feels exactly like something that would happen in a book like this. So I excitedly await that. I'm going to go read like probably 50 or 100 more pages, and then I'll come and update you. I'll see you then. You think he's going to do it, or just purr into the mic? Okay, I've got 100 pages left. I read like 75 pages, and the first few of them were full of things that I felt like I needed to comment on. First being her description of a nurse, the only nurse that she likes, as having skin so black that it's blue. I don't need to explain to you how dehumanizing that is, but it kind of gets worse because she treats the nurse, the narrative treats the nurse sort of with like the mammy stereotype. Like she is the only one who only one of the medical professionals here who really fits into the role of like caregiver. She calls me a sweetheart. It's a little bit weird, a little bit off. It definitely stood out to me. And that sort of nagging worry was confirmed with this thing that's like kind of a subtle tell. Once you start looking for it in your life, you will never not see it anymore. I'm going to read you this line. Pay close, but not that close attention to it. It was like how Mandarin speakers can sort of understand Cantonese, but not really, even though non-Chinese people assume all Chinese can communicate with one another, even though Mandarin and Cantonese are actually different. Did you catch that? Did you catch how non-Chinese are people, but Chinese are just Chinese? It's not super overt, but this is very, very telling of underlying beliefs and attitudes about people who are a different race from you. And I think that Gayle Forman has made it clear, while this was written in 2009, like, I don't know, I don't think that's a great excuse. She has some stuff to work through, for sure. So we get some more of Mia's relationship with Adam, and while the cello stuff is really annoying me, it's kind of a good thing that her entire life and personality and identity are centered around the cello, because if they weren't, she would revolve around Adam as her son, and I think we all know that would be a lot worse. She talks about how when the two of them first started dating, it was actually really awkward, about how fiction and fairy tales had influenced her into thinking that like the hardest part was getting to that magical first kiss, but actually that was the easiest part, and what was hard was right after, when you're unsure about like what your relationship status is. You don't know how to go from being friends to being into a relationship, and it's awkward. All of a sudden, you're shy and uncomfortable and horribly, painfully polite with each other. And I think that this is so true to the teenage experience, and I really liked how it was portrayed. Even in my relationship, we are adults, and we've known each other very closely for over 10 years. And just recently, we took a trip to my parents' house. We're never in the car together because neither of us has a car, but my partner can drive. Why was I shy? It was just like a situation I wasn't used to being in, like being in the passenger seat beside my partner. In what world would I be shy? But I was. As I've made clear so far, this book is not perfect, but the more I read it, the more I enjoy it, and the more I think it does have merit. It's also very, very fast. I'm reading this super quickly. This is kind of a bad time to say all that, actually, because the next thing that I want to talk about is Mia and Adam's first sexual experience. No! They spend a lot of time at her parents' house in the early days of their relationship, which kind of saves it at the beginning there because he fits right in with her family. At one point, he's over at her place, and him and her dad go and play basketball, and he comes back and he's a little bit freaked out because he had been stung on the palm by a bee, and her dad had sucked the venom out, and he says, "It's kind of weird that I've been more intimate with your dad than I have been with you." So then they go have family dinner, knowing that afterwards they're going to lose their virginities to each other. They're just sitting at the family dinner, and she talks about how she's buzzing like a tuning fork. Stop. So they have this dinner, they're filled with nerves and excitement, and then they get upstairs, and he says to her, "I want you to play me like a cello." I'm not joking. Hello? That is absolutely hilarious. And then she says that makes no sense. And then she thinks, actually, that makes perfect sense. And it gets worse. Because she goes, and she gets a bow. And she plays him with the bow, like furiously rubbing it against his skin. Would he not get like a carpet burn? Genuinely fucking hilarious, because this is framed as being really romantic. I think it would have felt a lot more corny and a lot more silly if this had been a kind of story where they were nervous and they were insecure and she didn't know how to approach like doing sexual things with this new boyfriend. And so the way that she figured out how to do it was by using her cello skills. That would have been ridiculous, but I don't know if this is better, because in this scenario, it's just nonsense. Why did she take out the bow? Why did she take out the bow? Like, genuinely, why would they act like that? It's great. It's so fucking stupid, and such a horrifically vivid mental image of a ridiculous tableau she's playing him with. She's playing him with her cello bow. Back in the hospital, her best friend Kim has arrived, and Kim is staying strong, and she's yelling at her mother, who is like crying and blubbering and embarrassing her, and she's saying like, "You can't cry because I'm not crying. This is my best friend." And then the memories we get here are just giving us some more context on Kim, and they're showing us a very different character than the young woman that has just arrived at the hospital, and I'm not 100% sure that it makes sense. Because there's no feeling that Kim is acting unlike herself in the hospital because there has been a crisis. The feeling Mia has is more similar to like, "Aw, that's my Kim." I'm just having a really hard time grasping how I'm supposed to be understanding her character. She is described over and over again as a goody two-shoes and then is never shown to fit that descriptor. So Mia and Kim had spent a long time before they became friends hating each other because they were both uptight, serious children who were devoted to their art. With Mia, it's obviously cello. With Kim, it's photography. Because of that, everybody assumed that they would be friends. And the more everyone pushed them together, the more they pushed themselves apart and against each other. And it's not until they got into a full-on fist fight and then were split up by teachers that they looked at each other, started laughing, and had been friends ever since. For a while, I was thinking that Mia's perception of Kim as good girl was meant to be inaccurate, but then it says that after this fight, they were able to shed those personas or those beliefs everybody had about them, because now everyone thought that they were cool. But after a while, they got right back into the roles of goody two-shoes. I'm finding Kim's character really difficult because, like every character in this book, like every character in many, 2009 era young adult fiction, she's not well developed. She doesn't have like a character. She has characteristics, but the characteristics it's telling us she has, it's not showing us. So I don't know what I'm supposed to be expecting from her. So when we go back to the hospital, her grandma and grandpa are allowed to go in and see her, and a nurse tells them that they need to go and they need to talk to her, that no matter what anyone says, she can hear them and she needs to know that they're there, because it's not her injuries or the doctors that decide whether or not she's going to live. It's her who makes that decision. The next memory we get is about her parents, and it's some context into their relationship. We learn that she had been the first baby of her parents' friend group because they had her at like 23 and she was kind of like raised within this friend group. We know that her parents had got married before 23 because, as her father says, girlfriend is such a stupid word. I couldn't stand calling her that, so we had to get married so I could call her wife. Real. That absolutely warmed me to him. I could not agree more. She then talks about her own conception, which, while it's not in great detail, that is not something that I want to know about, and also not something that I think she should know about. She was an accident, but a happy one. They tried for a sibling for a while. They did not succeed. They had some fertility issues, and then when Mia was like 10, Teddy surprised them. Back in the ICU, she's freaking out because she's come to the realization that it's up to her to decide whether or not she wants to live, and the weight of that decision is too much for her to bear. After this, we get a very long story about the previous Halloween where Adam had dressed up as Mozart, and then she had got her mom to help her dress up as a rocker chick, which she was expecting Adam to drool over, and he did think it was cool, but not to the degree that she really wanted him to. It is very much Sandy and Danny in Grease. This long story is showing us that she doesn't really feel like she belongs either in her family's world or in Adam's world. And I think this story does show growth, because it begins with her talking about how she doesn't want to go to Adam's show on Halloween, how she fucking hates going to his shows. And you think to yourself, he has made an active effort to appreciate and enjoy what you're passionate about, and you won't do the same for him. And then after a while, she realizes that. And then she does make that effort. And, she learns to enjoy Adam's things in her own way, not in this costume disguised as someone who's like him. I will say about this that I don't really buy the not belonging thing. I mean, she is so unconditionally loved and supported by literally everyone in her life. Like, girl, nobody fucking cares that you play the cello and you like classical music. Then Adam finally shows up at the ICU, the person that she has been waiting for. While the cello is occupying every single thought that she has, it is there in every breath that she takes. Adam really is not far behind it. He barges into the ICU, but he can't get to Mia because it's immediate family only, which upsets him greatly because her parents, who he was close to, have just died. He starts yelling at the nurse who has shown very little empathy by the narrative, who's really just doing her job, and then Kim leads him away. In the next memory, we get a little bit of information on Kim and Adam's relationship, which is basically non-existent. They don't hate each other. They don't particularly like each other. They're very distant. They have little in common, and neither of them is really willing to make a huge effort to force a relationship. Mia had been afraid to tell Kim about Adam because her and Kim have this theory that everything can be sorted into two categories. Two categories of relevance here being girls who have boyfriends in high school and girls who don't, and the two of them both fell into the girls who don't category quite comfortably. I do like this. I like this very black and white thinking. I think that is realistic to teenagers with a limited experience and a limited worldview. But I wish that Forman had committed to this. I wish that she had seen it for what it was, which I'm not convinced she did. I think she saw this little theory that they have more as just like a way to introduce what she wanted to talk about next. But I would have loved to see her actually incorporate that into Mia's mindset. I think this could have been a really interesting setup or explanation for how Mia approaches the world in a really immature way. So while it was hard for Mia to admit to Kim that she had moved into the other category away from her, Kim wasn't mad at her. She just said, just don't become one of those girls who's obsessed with her boyfriend or I'm gonna have to shoot you. And like, girl, get the fucking gun. Kim and Adam don't have any problems with each other. They're just not close. So it is very sweet. It's very heart-wrenching how Kim supports him in the hallway as he melts into this grief and panic. It's this thing of like old familiar dynamics becoming obsolete in a time of crisis. Everything is different now. It's sweet and it's sad and I like it. While I do think the goal of this and kind of the goal of a lot of this book is to make you cry and make you emotional, I don't think it's overdoing it too much. I don't think it's failing at wringing an emotion out of me either. I do know this book, and I also know it's directed towards young adults, but like when her grandpa goes into the ICU and sees her for the first time and he says, "Hello, Doc," did that make me feel like I was going to cry a little bit? Yes. I'm not above admitting that. Mia then loses track of Kim and Adam, and when she finds them again, they're scheming to figure out a way to get into the ICU. First, it's finding a janitor's outfit, then it's pulling a fire alarm. Kim finally asks him, why do you need to get in to see her so badly? And he says, I need her to know that I'm here. I need her to know that someone is still here. Which I think is kind of rude. I mean, Kim is there. Not only are her grandparents there, but a lot of her extended family is there. I think this is just him being really dismissive of other significant relationships that she has in her life and of other people that love her and that she loves. And it's playing into this thing that I haven't really liked in this book, where Adam, besides the cello, is the most important thing in Mia's world. And I think Mia is supposed to be a strong character with an identity and a personality outside of her boyfriend. And I don't want to see her pathetically fawning over him. And I don't want to see him being like, I'm the only person still left for her, when she is surrounded by people that love her. So that's where I've left off. I've got 100 pages left. Like I said, I want to reiterate, I am enjoying this book. I think this is better than books that I've read from this era and that I liked at this age. It's like a kind of a fun reading experience. It's keeping me going, even though objectively, like, not much is happening in this book. I think it has kind of like the perfect maturity of writing, where it's not like babying me, but it also is very simple and easy to read. I'm certainly not going to pretend that this isn't flawed, but it does have merit. I'll see what I say 100 pages from now. All right, I've finished If I Stay, and I'll tell you right now that I do have plenty more to complain about, and I think the end got a little bit weaker and more roll your eyes kind of dramatic, but on the whole, I am pleasantly surprised with this book. So the next memory that we get after we ended off on this kind of cliffhanger with Adam having a light bulb moment in his scheming is of 8th grade, when Mia decided that she was going to stop playing the cello. It had become a little bit boring, and it had also become lonely. Everyone around her plays very social music. But as she soon learned, she could no longer quit cello cold turkey than she could stop breathing. All I have to say here is, come on. You don't have to stoop this low, Gayle. But with her parents busy with Teddy, who at the time was a baby, she does pull back from her cello playing, from her practicing, and from her recitals, and the only person who notices is her best friend, Kim, who says, you can't quit the cello. It is who you are. It's a core part of your being. And Kim takes it into her own hands to find a band camp for Mia to go to up in Vancouver Island mention, which her parents immediately sign her up for. And she goes and she meets kids her own age who are just as into classical music as she is, and she learns to play with others in an orchestra. At this camp, she learns that they have this final performance, and the adult symphony chooses one of the youngins through auditions, like this grueling competitive process, to play with them and to do a solo. And I was already like preemptively angry about the idea of Mia winning this spot, because she had never played with an orchestra, and that would be fucking ridiculous. That would be absolutely ridiculous if they chose her first year at this camp, her first year ever playing with anyone other than just her teachers. She didn't, thank God. I think she would have been a far more extraordinarily annoying character if she had just been like unwaveringly good at the cello all the time, and then still had this attitude of like, playing cello makes me weird and different and I don't fit in because of it. And then she's like a prodigy. No, I would have hated it so much. Thank God it didn't go there. I do have a real complaint for this, not just something that I got mad about that didn't happen, and that is this student that she meets, another cello player named Simon, who is British in the worst way a character written by an American can be British, and that is that he describes everything as quite. He maybe has like 10 lines of dialogue. In 2 of them, he says bloody, also says beg pardon, just this entire sentence. I was hoping for some bloody good competition to up my game, as it were. Please, Gayle, please. Simon did not need to be British, Gayle. Back at the hospital, we are exposed to Adam's brilliant light bulb plan, which was to bring in the lead singer of the band that he had just opened for with his band. I genuinely have no idea what he expected her to do when he was like, oh my god, I know what to do, and brought her into the hospital. The plan they end up coming up with is going up to the ICU floor and having people go, oh my god, look, there's Brooke Vega. Like, apparently she's famous enough. They think that's gonna work. That's gonna do it. The nurses in the ICU are gonna be like, oh my god, look, it's Brooke Vega. As if. Would they even do that for, like, Harry Styles? Why was that the first person I came up with? Put the photo up. And never mind the fact that this is an off-limits area in the hospital that would absolutely have more security than just nurses standing outside of an unlocked door. They think if they just start making a ruckus, Adam is going to be able to sneak in. And he almost succeeds, but before he can get all the way to Mia, security escorts him out. This is the most poorly written, dramatic, and dumb scene in the entire book. I hated it. It brought it down a little bit for me. I think it was just really, really, really stupid. In a lot of ways, it's supposed to be poking fun at them and their bad acting when they start going, oh my god, look, there's Brooke. But at the same time, it's definitely supposed to be a cool moment of Adam fighting for his love and rallying all these people, and it does not feel it. When he gets down to the security station, they run into that family friend, Willow, who is the nurse at the other hospital. She has shown up, and somehow she pulls rank, and she gets Kim and Adam out of the security guard's hands. Now, seeing Willow and thinking about the other hospital, you may be thinking, and you may have actually been thinking this the entire time, like I have been thinking this the entire time, what's up with Teddy? You might be curious about the incuriosity about Teddy's whereabouts, and it's not until Mia sees Willow that she thinks to herself, Willow wouldn't have left Teddy. And she thinks about how her grandparents are both here, her entire family is here, and she realizes that Teddy is gone too. This is absolutely a gut punch, and I know that the first time I read this, I was at a time in my life where I was a really emotional person, and I was really ashamed of being such an emotional person. I was far more easily brought to tears than I am now, and I know when I got to the line, Teddy's gone too, I know I fucking sobbed. I know I relished in having that private sob that a book can give you. The next memory is about her mom's labor with Teddy, which she was there for. It always felt right to her to be there, and her mom wanted her there, and she was brave despite the blood and the very private moment that it was. She stood from the midwife's view, not with her queasy dad up standing with the mom, and she watched Teddy's birth. And she says that Teddy came out facing up so that the first thing he saw was her. That's so sad. This memory is almost the first one without a cello mention. We almost did it. And then it gets to the very end and she manages to sneak it in. She's talking about how her and Teddy were very close when he was quite little and how he went through this phase where he wouldn't sleep unless she played him a lullaby. And it was possible for her to just end the sentence there and not add on my cello. I mean, we all know that it was on the fucking cello, but it's almost pathological how compulsive her need is to mention the cello. Back in the hospital, she is destroyed by her knowledge that Teddy is also dead, and she goes through a very strange list of things that she's sad that he will miss out on in his life now. That list being, he's never gonna grow a mustache, he's never gonna get into a fist fight or shoot a deer, or kiss a girl, or have sex, or fall in love, or get married, or father his own curly-haired child. I don't think that she would be thinking about Teddy having sex. I kind of don't think that would be on, like, the top of her mind. I'm sure she'd be thinking about all the things her little brother is not going to be able to do. I'm not sure kissing, sex, falling in love, and getting married are necessarily all on that list, taking up actually most of that list. At the very least, I'm not sure we needed to add having sex in there. What instrument do you think he's gonna play? Okay. Mia in the bed has an emergency buildup of fluid in her stomach and she gets taken in again for surgery. This is, implied to be something to do with her mental state now knowing that Teddy is dead and her body starting to give up a little bit. The next memory we get was of the only funeral that she had ever attended, which was for one of her parents' friends who had died at 30 of an aneurysm. This memory is whatever. I kind of think it's just filler and it's not really telling us all that much about the characters, but there is something that I want to nitpick here, and that is that at the funeral, all of this guy's punk rock friends were really pissed off because his parents didn't accept his punk lifestyle or his atheism, and they threw this very impersonal funeral in a church. That's fine. That's reasonable enough to be upset about. You want your friend's memory to be honored in the way that he would have wanted it to have been honored. Except they all scoff at his uncle getting up and telling a story of teaching him how to ride a bike when he was 6. And they say, as if that was the only thing that ever happened in his life, as if that was the pinnacle of his whole life. But I hate that. I mean, first of all, funerals are for the living. And in telling this story, the uncle is talking about a pivotal moment in his relationship with his nephew. I don't think he's trying to imply that it was like the main thing that happened in this guy's life. I think it was a really important moment for him. I kind of think and have thought throughout this entire book that it doesn't feel like Gayle Forman has very much knowledge of or personal experience with punk rock culture. And that has been fine because this has been told from Mia's perspective, and she self-admittedly does not understand this culture. But I think it's here at this moment where it's a little bit less forgivable because it really feels like she is stripping these people of their humanity and their capacity for like compassion in favor of them having a specific style or lifestyle or aesthetic or whatever she thinks punk rock is. Back in the ICU, Mia has the thought, dying is easy, living is hard, which did have to come at some point. I wish it didn't, but I do think it had to come at some point. This book does a pretty good job of staying away from cliches like that, and then sometimes it just smacks you over the head with a fucking stinker. Her grandfather is beside the bed alone, and he's crying, and he tells her that all he wants in the world is for her to stay, but that he'll understand if she can't do it, that giving up is okay. And this permission feels like a gift. Here, there's some more memories that are starting to feel like filler. This has a little bit more of a purpose. It's giving us context on the relationship between this grandfather and his son, Mia's dad. We see his love for his son and his acceptance of and respect for the punk rock lifestyle, even though it is not anything that he himself would ever get into. And then in the ICU, Willow has managed to pull some strings, which I don't really understand because for one, she works at another hospital. She also, I don't think in any hierarchy, is above these ICU nurses. I feel like this is very lateral, and yet somehow she manages to get Adam in to see Mia, which triggers some thoughts in Mia about how different she is from other girls because she's not romantic and swoony and she didn't dream of falling in love and then love just like happened to her. This is absolutely a not like other girls story. And I don't think that she is throwing other girls under the bus enough for me to like viscerally hate her, but I am kind of fed up with it. It's happened a few times. She talks about a fight that the two of them had been having recently about the possibility of her going to New York to attend Juilliard. They are teenagers and they don't know how to handle having life pull them in different directions when they love each other so much. This isn't really a fight between them. It's more just like a building of tension, but it shows an imperfection in their relationship, I guess, which makes them feel a little bit more real. In the present day, Kim is now by her bedside talking to her, and she's telling her about everything that had happened that day and all the people who had come to see her, and she says, some of those people in that waiting room are related to you and some aren't, but we're all your family. And she kisses her on the forehead, and she says, you still have a family. Sue me. Sue me, it's cute. I don't care. I fucking teared up. The final memory of the book is from the previous summer when they had thrown together this impromptu Labor Day party with all of her loved ones. And it's a joyous and hot and sweaty and beautiful and happy occasion. And at the end, when most people had gone home and it was just the closest friends and family, they managed to convince her to join their jam on her cello, which is always something that she had refused to do, worrying about jamming with other people, worrying about how the cello would sound with these other instruments. And she does it. And the cello sounds beautiful, and this is like her moment of belonging, even because the cello had taken her away. Whatever, it is cute. I still have a problem with that. I don't think that the cello is as undesirable as she thinks it is, and I don't think it makes her so different as to be like not comprehensible by other people. So you see her playing her cello here, and you see her belonging, and you know the choice that she's going to make. I think throughout this book, you know the choice that she's going to make. Unfortunately, the book does cheapen itself a little bit here by having Adam be the final push towards her decision to stay. The very last scene is him in the hospital begging her to stay, telling her that he'll understand, he'll let her go if she comes back and she needs to abandon the life that she had lived with her family, telling her that he'll move with her to Juilliard. And then he puts headphones on her and she can no longer hear his voice. She can now hear Yo-Yo Ma. And she can see herself grieving, and she can see how horrible life will be, and she can see choosing to live, and she can see going to Juilliard, and she can see the love that is still there, and she can also feel memories of her parents and her brother. And her consciousness is ripped back into her body, and she feels it all. Not just the physical pain that she's in, but also the grief and the profound loss that she has been avoiding feeling while in this limbo state. And she uses all her power, everything she has in her body, to squeeze Adam's hand back. And the last line of the book is him saying, Mia? I'm sorry, but this book did kind of get me. Maybe I'm in a weird mood today, but I will admit that I teared up at multiple points here. I mean, it was trying to get me and it succeeded. Going in, I was not actually expecting to like this book, and I was certainly not expecting to be affected by it. And while I have a lot of complaints for sure, I also have a lot of praise. And in the 15 years since Gayle Forman released this, I can absolutely see her having written better young adult fiction. With the end, I really do wish that Kim had been the major push for her to choose to stay instead of the fucking boyfriend. I wish she had more of an identity outside of her boyfriend. It just didn't feel like her being so caught up with him and thinking about him constantly fit in with the character that I felt I was reading about. And also there was never an acknowledgement that she ends up fitting in perfectly with all of these girls that she looks down on for being boy obsessed or like desiring love. I don't think that we were supposed to see her as fitting in with them. I think we were supposed to see her as different. And like even at the end, I read the interview with the author that's in the back here, and she says that she has a crush on Adam. Like, I think it is truly a positive thing how close their relationship is, even though it does take away from Mia's identity. At the end, the author also says that Kim is a mix of two of her own closest friends, and I think that explains the dissonance I was feeling with her character that I just couldn't square. I mean, it just feels like Gayle Forman was trying to write two different characters, and she never managed to combine it. The book is kind of mostly just memories, and I think it definitely could have been more interesting if it had explored her grief a little bit more, but I also understand that that is a huge ask. I mean, how could someone possibly comprehend the magnitude of this kind of grief? I do think that it was a cop-out to say at the very end, like, I was just avoiding thinking about it. Would have loved for this book to have been some sort of a journey of her figuring out who she was without the cello or without the boyfriend. I also think that it's kind of insane with how much she talks about the fucking cello that no one had thought up until the point Adam did to play her cello music. I could not buy into the story it was trying to tell about Mia not belonging. I think it was trying to really force some like classic, typical teenage fiction themes that just did not fit in with this story at all, and kind of made Mia a bit unlikable in an unintended way. I can't help but commenting on this. It's always 2009 with the use of the fucking R word. It was only once, but I still noticed it, and I still hated it. Last time I made that comment, people said both, no one knew in 2009 that you couldn't say that, and, well, I knew in 2009 that you couldn't say that, and I would just like to say, none of us can generalize our experiences with change in language. I mean, like, even just the United States, which I'm not from, is massive and has many different cultures, and things changed at different speeds. That's what I'm gonna say. That's all I'm gonna say on that, okay? I still think it's shitty and I hate it, but I don't necessarily know if Gayle Forman thought it was wrong. With Paper Towns, I could tell that some part of John Green knew that it was wrong that he was using that word. Just one use of it, it's hard to know how the author felt about it, but it stood out to me. I don't like it. But aside from all that, more than anything, I thought the writing was actually pretty fucking good. I think it was easy to read, it was fast-paced, and it was exactly what it needed to be. I also think it's funny. Like, sure, sometimes unintentionally, with her playing Adam with the cello bow, like, what was that? Where was she touching him with that? Was it on? No, there's no way. Was it on his penis? That is unintentional, but I also think there is intended humor here, and I found myself, like, smirking every once in a while. And Forman is a good enough author to make the little reliefs of a funny phrasing or a bit of humor feel effortless, which I appreciate appreciate the skill that takes. If you were to take out the slur and the racism, I think that this book holds up well enough today. I think there are things it could have done far better, but I also think in comparison to other young adult fiction of the time, this is like kind of a good book. Like, I kind of want to give it 4 stars. Is that crazy? It got me. I'll say it. It fucking got me. So there's the surprise of the century. If I Stay is kind of good still.